Have you ever wondered why the number 40 keeps appearing in sacred stories? 40 days of flood, 40 years in the desert, 40 days of fasting, 40 days after death. Could it be just a coincidence? Or does it hide a spiritual code that religions have partially revealed and partially buried? If ancient Gnostic texts were right, these 40 days mark not only a passage through time, but the journey of the soul through realms of consciousness where it faces its true judges. Not angels of punishment, but forces that test its awareness before it can break free from the cycle of reincarnation. What if the number 40 is not about time at all, but about transformation, the symbolic period in which the soul sheds its earthly illusions? What if everything we've been told about heaven, hell, and judgment was only a veil covering a deeper truth about what happens after the last breath? In this video, we'll uncover what the forbidden Gnostic writings reveal about those 40 mysterious days, what the soul truly experiences, and why this same number echoes through every religion from Egypt to Christianity. But be warned, once you understand its meaning, you'll never look at death or life the same way again. Before we open the ancient pages that speak of the soul's final passage, subscribe to the channel and join thousands of seekers who, like you, are awakening to the hidden revelations that religion has kept veiled for centuries. To understand why the number 40 repeats across the world's sacred stories, we must go back to the earliest civilizations, long before the rise of modern religions. In ancient Egypt, priests believed that the soul, or Ba, needed 40 days to detach completely from the body. During that period, spiritual rituals and invocations helped guide it through the do-it, the Egyptian underworld, a realm of tests where each soul faced the truth of its own actions and thoughts. Only after those 40 symbolic stages could it move toward Osiris, the god of resurrection, to weigh its heart against the feather of truth. Centuries later, this same pattern reappeared in early Christian tradition. The Gospels say that Jesus remained on earth for 40 days after his resurrection, teaching his disciples about the mysteries of the kingdom. To the Gnostics, this was no random number. They believed that those 40 days symbolized the spiritual stages the soul must pass through before reaching full awareness, the same process the Egyptians had described thousands of years earlier. Even the Old Testament seems coded with this number. Moses spends 40 days on Mount Sinai to receive divine wisdom. The Israelites wander 40 years in the desert to purify their faith. Noah faces 40 days of flood, a symbolic cleansing before a new beginning. Over and over, 40 marks a threshold, the bridge between corruption and awakening, ignorance and revelation, flesh and spirit. But the Gnostic texts went further. They claimed that this number was not a coincidence, nor a poetic symbol. It was a spiritual formula encoded in time itself. 40 days represent the cycle of purification required for the human soul to dissolve the illusions of the demiurge, the false god who rules the material world. During those 40 symbolic days, or levels of awareness, the soul frees itself from the weight of its own ignorance. Some scholars believe that the early church understood this secret, but gradually replaced it with a simpler narrative. 40 days became just a historical or moral period, no longer a mystical process. The esoteric dimension of death, the journey of consciousness beyond the body, was silenced, buried under layers of doctrine. Yet the echo of those ancient beliefs survived, hidden in rituals of mourning and prayers for the dead, where people still light candles and pray for the soul 40 days after death. So the question arises, what happens during those 40 days? What did the Gnostics say the soul encounters between worlds? And why did they warn that this period determines whether we return or finally awaken? According to the forbidden Gnostic Gospels, the 40 days after death are not mere waiting. They are the soul's great test. Texts like the Pistis Sophia and the books of G, discovered in fragments from Egypt and buried for centuries, describe how the soul must pass through 40 spiritual regions, or eons, each ruled by an archon, a cosmic gatekeeper that embodies one of the illusions of matter. In Gnostic cosmology, the archons are not demons in the traditional sense, but beings of control, created by the demiurge, the false god who shaped the material world. Their task is to keep souls trapped in cycles of confusion, fear, and forgetfulness. Each time a person dies, the soul begins its ascent, but to rise, it must recognize each archon for what it truly is, a reflection of the illusions it carried during life. The Pistis Sophia tells that the soul's journey begins in the lower firmament, where it is confronted by its own desires and attachments, the forces that chained it to the body. Then, one by one, it faces the rulers of the seven heavens, powers of pride, greed, envy, lust, wrath, sloth, and fear. If the soul still identifies with them, it is drawn back to the physical world, what we now call reincarnation. But if it perceives them as illusions, the gates open, and the soul ascends to a higher vibration. Beyond the seventh heaven, the path becomes more subtle and luminous. The texts describe 33 more gates, guarded by powers of light and shadow, where the soul must answer for its knowledge of the divine spark within. These are not external judges, but reflections of consciousness, mirrors of the self. The soul must remember the secret words, the signatures of light that correspond to each gate, just as initiates once did in the mystery schools of Egypt and Greece. The 40 stages are therefore not a punishment, but a process of remembering. The Gnostics believed that salvation comes not through blind faith, but through gnosis, direct inner knowledge of one's divine origin. The soul that truly knows itself passes freely through the spheres, unafraid, recognizing that the archons have power only over ignorance. The 40 days after death symbolize this spiritual purification, a gradual awakening from the dream of matter into the memory of the divine. But this vision was too radical for the early church. It denied the need for priestly mediation, rituals, or external judgment. It placed liberation entirely in the hands, or rather, the consciousness of each individual. For this reason, texts like the Pistis Sophia were hidden, condemned, and called heresy. The idea that human beings could ascend to divine realms through inner knowledge threatened every structure of authority built upon fear of the afterlife. Still, the symbol of 40 days survived, in mourning rites, in spiritual traditions across East and West, and in secret teachings passed from master to disciple. And yet, if these texts are true, then those 40 days are not something that happens only after death. They may already be happening now. Every time we face a trial, every time our illusions are stripped away. Could it be that the 40 gates of the soul are a mirror of our life itself, a process we must awaken to before the final breath? When Gnostic communities flourished in the first centuries after Christ, they taught that the 40 days after death were not about punishment, but awakening. The soul, they said, was a spark of the divine imprisoned in matter, and these 40 stages symbolized its gradual remembrance of its true origin. Yet, as the early church began to consolidate spiritual authority, this mystical journey was transformed into something else entirely, a doctrine of fear. To the bishops and councils of the new orthodoxy, the idea that salvation depended on knowledge within was dangerous. If every person could awaken through direct contact with the divine, what power would remain for institutions? Thus, the 40 days became linked to judgment, to the weighing of sins and the threat of eternal damnation. The mystical stages of light became reinterpreted as an interval where souls awaited divine verdict, not their own illumination. Historical records show how this shift happened gradually. The Epistle of Peter to Philip, a Gnostic text banned by the Church, speaks of Christ, revealing 40 mysteries of light to his disciples after the resurrection. But by the time of the 4th century, official doctrine had reduced those 40 days to a mere chronological period in which Christ proved his physical reality. The inner, symbolic meaning, the ascent through the heavens, was stripped away. What once represented transformation was recast as obedience, and what once liberated consciousness became a reminder to submit. Even the rituals of mourning began to reflect this change. In early Gnostic sects, the 40 days after a person's death were seen as a celebration of passage, with prayers intended to guide the soul through the celestial gates. But under institutional control, these rites shifted toward fear of judgment, emphasizing repentance and intercession rather than illumination. The soul, now dependent on prayers and priests, lost its sovereignty. And yet, the echoes of the old teaching survived in subtle ways. In Eastern Christianity, families still pray for the dead for 40 days, an echo of the ancient Egyptian and Gnostic idea that the soul journeys through unseen realms during that time. The Church may have changed the story, but the number 40 refused to die. It remained as a living code buried in tradition, a reminder of the truth that cannot be completely erased. Some scholars suggest that the insistence on this number was a way of preserving the hidden wisdom within the new orthodoxy. Others see it as the ultimate irony, that the Church unknowingly carried forward the very symbol it had tried to erase. Either way, the mystery persisted. So, if these 40 days were never about external punishment, what were they truly for? The Gnostics gave an answer that still challenges modern faith. The 40 days are the time it takes for consciousness to free itself from illusion, a mirror of the inner path every seeker must walk, through ignorance, through desire, through fear, until they reach the light within. And this leads to a question each of us must face. When our own 40 days begin, whether in life or in death, will we recognize the archons for what they are? Or will we keep mistaking the illusions of this world for truth? To the ancients, numbers were never mere quantities. They were living symbols, carriers of divine intelligence. The number 40 stood at the center of a vast pattern woven through myth, mysticism, and the natural order itself. Across cultures, it represented transition, the sacred time required for something impure to become pure, for the spirit to shed its old form before awakening into a new one. In Egypt, as we've seen, the priests prepared the body for 40 days before burial, but this wasn't simply about preservation. It mirrored the belief that the soul itself needed 40 stages to transform, just as the body was purified through the embalmer's art. In Babylonian astronomy, the planet Venus, sacred to the goddess Inanna, disappeared from the sky for 40 days before rising again as the morning star, symbolizing the death and rebirth of the feminine principle. Even nature echoes this hidden rhythm. 40 weeks is the time it takes for a human being to form in the womb. 40 days mark the lunar cycle multiplied by a sacred triad. The human body itself regenerates its skin roughly every 40 days, renewing its outer vessel. Everywhere we look, the pattern repeats: decay and renewal, exile and return, death and resurrection. The Gnostics understood this as no coincidence. They saw the number 40 as the mathematical signature of transmutation, the alchemical process of the soul awakening from matter. Each day represented a step away from illusion, a peeling away of false identity. In their secret teachings, to complete the 40 stages was to become anthropos teleos, the perfected human, one who no longer belongs to the world of the demiurge. Modern scholars often dismiss this as mysticism, yet even science reveals strange resonances. Brain cycles of renewal, hormone rhythms, cellular repair, many follow roughly 40-day patterns. Could it be that this ancient code was not only spiritual, but biological, inscribed in both body and cosmos? When Jesus fasted for 40 days in the desert, Gnostics interpreted it not as a trial of endurance, but as the initiation of consciousness. The desert was not a place, but a symbol, the inner void where illusion dies and true perception is born. The same pattern appears in the story of Moses, Elijah, Buddha, and countless initiates who withdrew for 40 days before illumination. 40, then, is the universal cipher of metamorphosis, the time between ignorance and revelation, between the old self and the awakened one. And if this law governs both body and soul, then the 40 days after death might not mark the end of existence, but the final stage of purification before rebirth or liberation. The soul, freed from flesh, completes the last cycle of 40 transformations, dissolving the dense illusions of the world until nothing remains but pure consciousness. It's a breathtaking thought that the same number shaping the embryo, the moon, and the resurrection of gods also shapes the soul's ascent through eternity. Perhaps that's why no religion could erase it completely. The number 40 is not just a belief. It is a law of nature itself, whispering through every form of life. Nothing dies. Everything transforms. But this raises a profound question. If the number 40 governs both the body and the soul, does that mean we are living inside a cosmic pattern, one designed to awaken us through cycles of 40? And if so, what happens when we become conscious of that pattern? If you've followed the revelation so far, take a moment to tell me in the comments what you believe this number means for you personally. Does it symbolize death or awakening? Your reflection might open another layer of this mystery for someone else who reads it. According to the Gnostic texts, what happens after death is not the end. It's the mirror of what has always been happening. The 40-day journey of the soul was not just a singular event, but a pattern of existence that repeats across incarnations. Each time the soul enters a new body, it descends through the same 40 gates it must later ascend to escape. Life itself, then, is the ongoing echo of those 40 initiations, a training ground where consciousness slowly learns to recognize illusion and reclaim its light. In the Pistis Sophia, the Savior tells his disciples that the soul, if it fails to reach full knowledge after death, is drawn back by the archons into the world of the body. These forces, the Gnostics said, are not external demons but invisible programs of control, patterns of desire, fear, and ignorance that chain the divine spark to the material plane. Each archon embodies one distortion of truth: attachment to pleasure, hunger for power, pride in intellect, fear of loss, dependence on form. When the soul does not yet see through them, it falls again, clothed in new flesh, beginning the 40 stages once more. Some modern scholars interpret this as a kind of spiritual physics, a cycle of energetic purification. Every lifetime represents 40 symbolic steps toward awakening. Yet most people remain unaware of this cycle because the demiurge, the false creator, keeps consciousness occupied with endless distractions: wealth, conflict, pleasure, and suffering, the lower vibrations that prevent remembrance. The system itself feeds on unawakened souls, using them as fragments of energy within a greater illusion. The 40 days after death were described by the Gnostics as a judgment by recognition. The soul is shown not punishment, but truth. Every moment of forgetfulness, every illusion it believed. It stands before its own consciousness, stripped of excuses, and must answer only one question. Did you remember who you are? Those who did not awaken return to the wheel. Those who did pass beyond it, into the pleroma, the fullness of divine light. This vision differs sharply from the moral theology of later religion. Salvation here is not a matter of reward or punishment, but perception. The universe is not a courtroom. It is a mirror. And the number 40 represents the complete cycle through which that mirror is polished until it reflects only the divine. But what does this mean for us, living now in bodies of flesh and time? The Gnostics taught that we need not wait for death to begin the ascent. The same process can unfold within a single lifetime if one becomes aware of the archons at work in thought and emotion. Every inner trial, every loss, every betrayal, every heartbreak becomes one of the 40 gates. When you resist the temptation to identify with it, when you choose consciousness over reaction, you ascend one more step toward the true self. In this way, the 40-day cycle becomes a living practice. Fasting for 40 days, withdrawing from the world for reflection, or even enduring 40 days of silence. Such acts were seen as symbolic deaths, miniature versions of the posthumous journey. The desert of Moses, the fasting of Christ, the meditation of Buddha, all mirror the same law, that awakening requires 40 symbolic days of purification, whether lived in body or spirit. The Gnostic master Valentinus once wrote that the resurrection is already happening. To him, resurrection meant not the revival of flesh, but the awakening of perception while still alive. Those who achieve this liberation need not pass through the 40 posthumous days at all, for they have already transcended them within. And perhaps that is the ultimate secret, hidden beneath centuries of doctrine. The soul's 40-day journey is a metaphor for every moment we spend remembering the light we came from. The same number that governs death governs rebirth. The same pattern that carries the soul beyond the body also shapes every transformation of consciousness here on earth. So when religions speak of 40 days of mourning, fasting, or prayer, they are unconsciously repeating the Gnostic wisdom that enlightenment takes place through 40 thresholds, physical or spiritual, until the illusion of separation dissolves. But the question remains, if we are trapped in this great loop of 40 days, repeating it lifetime after lifetime, what would it take to finally break free? Is there a final key, a word, or vibration that can release us from the grip of the demiurge? The Gnostics believed there was, and it was not a prayer, nor a ritual, but a remembering. They called it the word of light, the sacred awareness that the divine lives within, not above. The moment one remembers that, the entire machinery of reincarnation loses its power. The archons fade, the 40 gates dissolve, and the soul passes directly into the realm of pure being. So perhaps the 40 days after death are not waiting for us in the future. They are unfolding now, every time we awaken a little more. And if so, then life itself is the afterlife, the 40-day passage we must walk with open eyes before the final breath. According to the secret Gnostic books, there is a moment that comes after the 40 days, a hidden 41st threshold that was almost never mentioned in canonical scripture. It marks the end of the soul's passage through illusion and the beginning of a completely different existence. Some ancient mystics called it the day without shadows, others the crossing of the silence. It is the instant when consciousness realizes that there was never any separation between itself and the divine, except in perception. In the Pistis Sophia, this moment is described through a vision. The soul, having passed through every gate of light, reaches a vast sea of stillness. The archons cannot enter there. Time itself seems to dissolve, because time was one of their inventions, a chain forged to keep the soul believing in beginnings and ends. When the 40 gates fall away, the traveler stands before what the Gnostics named the pleroma, the fullness of God, not as a being, but as boundless awareness. But there is a choice. The soul can either merge into that ocean of light, losing all individuality, or it can turn back, willingly, to descend once more into the world of form, carrying memory of the divine into matter. This is the mystery of the Christos, the awakened one who chooses to return so that others may remember. The 41st day, then, is not merely liberation, it is decision. Will the soul dissolve into unity, or will it become a living bridge between worlds? The Gnostics said that very few reach this stage. Most souls, even after purification, are drawn back by compassion, by the magnetic pull of those still asleep. This voluntary return is what later traditions called reincarnation of the Bodhisattva, the Christ returning in many forms, the teacher reborn among men. In that sense, the story of Jesus ascending after 40 days was never about a single man disappearing into heaven. It was the code for consciousness, transcending illusion, then returning in spirit to guide humanity from within. On this final day, the soul beholds the true face of the demiurge, not as a monster, but as ignorance itself, a mask now unneeded. The illusion collapses. The archons lose all authority because they can rule only those who still believe in separation. In that instant, the soul sees that even darkness served a purpose, to give contrast to light, to make knowledge possible. This realization transforms all fear into gratitude. The prison becomes a school, and the tormentors become teachers. Some texts describe that, upon reaching the 41st gate, the soul hears a sound, not a word, but a vibration older than creation. The Gnostics called it the word of the eons, the first tone uttered when the divine dreamed the universe into being. To hear it is to remember one's origin completely. After that, No command, no God, no law can compel the soul to return. It moves by choice alone, radiating a light that the lower worlds can barely endure. Yet this revelation carries an unsettling truth. If the soul is already divine, then perhaps the entire 40-day journey was only a dream, a cosmic simulation within consciousness itself. The archons, the gates, the purifications, even death, all stages of a vast awakening inside the mind of God. And if that's true, then life and afterlife are not opposites but mirrors. Every suffering we endure is one of the 40 gates. Every act of awareness we achieve, one of the 40 ascensions. The 41st day is not somewhere beyond the stars. It may already be unfolding within us, waiting for the moment we awaken to it. Pause for a moment and feel what that means. If you were to die today, what illusions would still hold you? What archons of fear, resentment, or pride would pull you back into the cycle? And if you knew that letting go of them now would free you forever, would you dare to release them? Tell me in the comments what you think the 41st day truly represents. Is it the end of the journey, or the moment we realize that the journey was never real? Your insight might awaken someone who reads your words, just as these forgotten texts have awakened us today. Now that we've walked through the hidden meaning of the 40 days, across tombs, temples, and secret manuscripts, a haunting realization emerges. The entire mystery was never about the dead. It was always about the living. The Gnostics taught that every soul carries within it a secret map of 40 gates, and that these gates are not crossed only after death, but in each moment of awareness. Every time you confront illusion and choose truth, you pass one. Every time you let go of fear, you step through another. The afterlife is not waiting beyond the grave. It is unfolding right here, inside consciousness, one revelation at a time. That is why the number 40 echoes endlessly through scripture and ritual. It is the signature of transformation, of the human becoming divine through experience. Moses climbed 40 steps of silence before hearing the word. Jesus endured 40 nights before the dawn of realization. Even your body renews itself in 40 days, whispering the same message written into your cells. Nothing is lost, only transformed. When religion spoke of judgment, the Gnostics spoke of recognition. When others spoke of punishment, they spoke of awakening. To them, heaven and hell were not places, but states of consciousness. The real journey is to remember what has been forgotten, that you were never a sinner waiting for forgiveness, but a fragment of light learning to see itself again. The true resurrection is gnosis, direct knowledge that death is an illusion, a doorway that consciousness crosses every day. It awakens from ignorance. So, what happens 40 days after death? The same thing that happens every time you wake from a dream. The soul realizes what it truly is. Some return to the dream to help others wake. Others dissolve into the silence of the pleroma. But both paths lead home. If this revelation resonated with you, if it stirred something ancient inside your heart, then understand this. You are meant to hear it. The very act of listening means you've already stepped through one of your 40 gates. Don't stop now. There are still more thresholds to cross, more memories of your divine origin waiting to surface. That is why this space exists, a place for seekers of hidden truths, for those who refuse to accept the surface story. Subscribe to this channel not just to follow videos, but to keep this light alive, to join a community that remembers what the world has forgotten. Every like, every comment, every shared thought is another spark added to the flame of remembrance. And before you leave this moment, carry one question with you. If the number 40 marks the time between illusion and awakening, how many of your 40 days have already passed? The search for truth doesn't end here. It begins every time you choose to see.